talking about you, the Godfather, Godmother. I imagine that pissed James Brown completely off because Bootsy was one of his sons. And that wasn't Bootsy saying it, that was George saying it, of course. Of course it was George. But imagine James Brown listening to Let's Take It to the Stage and he hears George say, Godmother. Who's my son calling me the Godmother? I'm gonna boot up his ass. I'm the Godfather. I'm James Brown. I'm Mr. Dynamite. Heartbreak Man show business. It's the man Brown. Talk about some Godmother. I put my Godfather foot up his ass. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another ride on the Groove Line, the brand new YouTube show that's going to discuss music from the past, present, and, well, not the future, but we'll get to the future once we get there, but the past and the present for sure. My name is Chris Stevens. Welcome back. Thank you all for your kind words and feedback on our first episode, which was celebrated the 35th anniversary of Johnny Gill's self-titled Motown debut. And we are doing another retrospective review today, and we are going to go back into time 50 years this week, as a matter of fact. One of the next to last week of April in 1975. And 1975 was an interesting year for Black music as a whole because it was the year without a Stevie Wonder album. I mean, granted, Fulfilling Its First Finale was cycling out. I mean, it was still hitting on the charts, but it wasn't hitting as high as Intervisions had before it, as Talking Book had before it, and as Songs in the Key of Life would afterwards. But 1975, I think people noticed that Stevie wasn't going to be putting out an album, so they said, all right, let's get our shit together before he comes back. He comes back around. And of course, he came back around with Songs in the Key of Life in 1976. But this particular look at 1975, which is probably going to end up being a series on this YouTube channel, is going to take a look at the chaotic brilliance and the chaotic genius of one George Clinton. And of course, George is the head of the P-Funk enterprise, Parliament and Funkadelic. And Parliament and Funkadelic put out albums back to back in April of 75. The first one that came out was under the Parliament handle of Chocolate City on April 8th, 1975. And April 21st, 1975 was the Funkadelic arm of the crew with Let's Take It to the Stage. And Chocolate City, it's an interesting album from the perspective of this is the R&B side of Parliament Funkadelic really honing their chops because George didn't get a chance to play a lot of that stuff for the first half of the 1970s because for people that don't know, Parliament's first album, Osmium, came out in early 1970, middle 1970. And George lost the rights to the name for about 4 or 5 years. So, but Funkadelic was actually the name of the backing band of Parliament because Billy Bass Nelson came up with the name while he was tripping off of something in the back of a van. So Funkadelic was actually the band that supported Parliament. But George was like, okay, we still got rights to the Funkadelic name. Let's move this shit to Westbound Records and do some stuff there. And that's where you find their self-titled debut as Funkadelic in 1970, Free Your Mind and Your Ass Will Follow later on that year. Then Maggot Brain, America Eats Its Young, my personal favorite in the early P-Funk and Funkadelic years, Cosmic Slop. And then, of course, their most cohesive effort, in my opinion, Standing on the Verge of Getting On. But Let's Take It to the Stage. Let's Take It to the Stage was a funny record. We'll talk about that later. But we're going to talk about Chocolate City and Parliament now because Chocolate City, like I said, it was Parliament fine-tuning their R&B chops. And this was Bootsy Collins bringing a lot of that James Brown era style of band showmanship and songwriting to George. Not to say that George couldn't hold his own water writing songs, obviously. He had Bernie Worrell as a partner. We'll talk more about Bernie in a minute. But Bootsy did a lot of great work on Chocolate City. I mean, the title track itself, it sounds sort of James-esque, but it's not James-esque. I mean, it's clearly Parliament all the way, but you can tell Bootsy's influence from just those 18 months he spent in the school of the one. And Chocolate City became an anthem for Washington, D.C. That's what radio jocks, were calling D.C. in the early 70s. So by the time Georgia heard about it, he was like, we need to do an album called Chocolate City. And of course, DC has always been a P-Funk stronghold for years and will continue to be one. So George was like, let's do something for the city. So Chocolate City, the album and the title track. It's so funny because when you listen to that record, George is like, heard we got some Chocolate Cities already, like Gary, New York City, and we're working on Atlanta. And it's funny he says that because in 1975, and look at Atlanta now, Atlanta is the new Black Mecca. So much so that native aliens are saying, we full, stop coming. So it was funny that George says that we're working on Atlanta, and somebody told me we might get LA. I mean, Black people weren't always omnipresent as we are right now. That's why, they hate us so much, that because we're everywhere. But just that song itself set the tone for a fun album. Just listening to it, I had to listen to it back the day before I started. And one of my favorite songs on the album is Side Effects because it is a song clearly dedicated to a woman who is playing the game. And that's what Ray Davis sings in the song. She should have been the man the way she played it. It was like women have always had, and I don't want to say always, but clearly in the 70s, that wave of feminism and sexual revolution had women taking control of their lives in ways that men had not imagined before. Which is why I don't understand why these dudes are freaking out about women not wanting to be bothered in 2025. Because women were already flipping the script in 1975. Then when you think about, let's think about 1975 from a cultural perspective. Just the previous year, 1974, was the first time that women were allowed to take out credit cards and start bank accounts in their own name. Like, granted, this is 1974. The world has had women long before 1974, and this was the first year that a woman could go to a bank and say, I want a credit card and a bank account in my own name. No, I'm not married. No, I don't have a married name. Kiss my ass. Give me the account. So women have started, doing it for themselves years before this wave of men freaking out about it now. Also, a great song was I Misjudged You, because again, this was a dude who felt guilty about when he asked this woman to be his girl and she said, yeah, right away. He was like, I couldn't believe that you believed in love at first sight. I didn't think you were a good girl. So that Madonna horror complex thing always been a thing too. It's so funny because men, we're all guilty of this. Those of us who date women, have sex with women, blah, 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 blah. We want women to be forward. We want them to be open. We want them to be down. But when they are open, when they are down, and they still call the shots, it's panic situation. So that's where I Misjudge You come from, because this is pretty much, the Funkadelic, the Parliament guys begging for this woman back. Like, yeah, I slut shamed you, but please, I need you back because that thing is just too good. That's the 70s, man. But I think what makes that record so fun from a listening standpoint is you hear the horns. Like I don't know if that was the earliest iteration of the horny horns, but you can hear that James Brown, JB's, Fred Wesley, Maceo Parker influence that Bootsy brought to the band. And it went off without a hitch, because when you think about Up for the Downstroke the previous year, they were still trying to figure out how they were going to play that R&B scene. I mean, Up for the Downstroke had its moments, but Chocolate City felt a lot more cohesive. It felt like what was actually to come, and we'll review that album when the time comes later on this year. So the standout tracks for me are the title track, Side Effect, Bigfootin', and I Misjudged You, and Together. Together is really good. It's short, but it's good. But if you're really interested in finding out that R&B side of P-Funk that had been dormant for the first half of the 70s and started to come back alive around the middle tail of that decade, Chocolate City is a great album to listen to. I mean, you're not going to find anything really groundbreaking in terms of sound and songwriting, but you're just going to hear a more cohesive unit than you heard on Up for the Downstroke the previous year. And that's not, again, I'm not saying that Up for the Downstroke was a bad album. It was a nice way to reintroduce Parliament. because George had just been doing, they just been doing Funkadelic stuff straight for 3 or 4 years. But now they were like, okay, now we can put down the fuzzy guitars. We can put down the bang bang of the drums. We can pick up the horns. We can pick up the bass a little bit. So Chocolate City is a wonderful album to listen to. Highly recommend it. However, let's take it to the stage, boy, from the Funkadelic side. This was their next to last album on Westbound. So it's funny because Westbound sort of gives George a stage, but it was also part of the reason he isn't in charge of his rights and stuff now. Because Westbound, that contract, whatever Armin Baladian had George signing back in the day, just absolutely twisted everything up in knots. And 50 years later, George is still fighting that fight. God bless him. But on the music side of it, let's take it to the stage. I've said previously that I felt like Standing on the Verge of Getting It On was the best early P-Funk album. Let's take it to the stage, Ain't Far Behind. Because again, this is Bootsy on here. Bootsy has the funniest song. No, he doesn't have the funniest song on the album. He has one of the funniest songs on the album. Come On Be My Beach. And yes, it is a song about the beach, but the way it's being said, you would think that they're trying to slide the other B word in there. Like you know what I'm saying. And it's funny because we mentioned this before, that a lot of the songs in the 70s were not really friendly to women or gay folks. I mean, for crying out loud, Funkadelic in 74 had a song called Jimmy's Got a Little Bit of Bitch in Him. So why frown? Yeah. Even the sun go down. They were wilding, boy, but yeah, Come On Be My Beach is a funny song. No Head, No Backstage Pass is hilarious if you listen to it with the understanding that this is not a woman-friendly song. I know the drummer, can you let me in? Tell the guitar player I brought a friend. Ask the roadies, do they need a hand? Tell them there's a girl named Jan. The doorman said, no head, no backstage pass. Think about this. You don't even know if these girls are of age trying to get backstage. But you talking about no head, no backstage pass. I mean, this was the 70s. You know, there wasn't a lot. I mean, unfortunately, there weren't a lot of ID checks going on back then. I mean, there are super groupies that's what they were called, and that's what they call themselves sometimes. I mean, there were super groupies who have written memoirs about how they were like 16 and 17 sneaking backstage to see their favorite stars or whatever. Not saying it's right by any stretch of the imagination, but I just found that to be crazy that in 1975, knowing that y'all weren't really checking IDs, talking about no head, no backstage pass. Awkward. But that song just is like, it's one of those ones in the Funkadelic catalog that just, it's ghastly, but it's also one that just speaks to the debauchery of the band. But the title track is probably one of the earliest instances of what we would consider a diss today. I think the earliest one, though, of course, is Sweet Home Alabama with Leonard Skinner, and they're talking about Southern man like Neil Young the Southern man don't need Neil Young around. Like Neil Young, they told Neil Young to mind his Canadian business. So, that always boggles the mind. That always cracks me up. They were like, keep your Yankee ass up there in the Great White North, because this is how we do things in Sweet Home Alabama. Yeah, they told Neil Young mind his Canadian business. So that always cracked me up. But let's take it to the stage from Funkadelic is absolutely a diss song. George starts off with, hey, Sloofus, that's Rufus, tell me something good. Earth, hot air, and no fire. Slick in the family brick. That's Sly in the Family Stone. Fool in the gang. That's self-explanatory. Talking about you, the Godfather. Godmother. I imagine that pissed James Brown completely off, because Bootsy was one of his sons. And that wasn't Bootsy saying it. That was George saying it, of course. Of course it was George. But imagine James Brown listening to Let's Take It to the Stage, and he hears George say, Godmother. Who's my calling me the Godmother? I'm gonna boot up his ass. I'm the Godfather. I'm James Brown. I'm Mr. Dynamite. Heartbreak Man show business. In the world. Talk about some Godmother. I put my Godfather foot up his ass. I imagine that's how James might have felt. But that was, I mean, the song title itself, Let's Take It to the Stage. This is like, we are a better band than anybody that we've name dropped in this album, in this song, and we will prove it. So let's take it to the stage. Let's see who comes out the winner. It also said funk used to be a bad word. Now everybody's getting down. So, quick history lesson. The first time that funk really became a thing was, of course, with James Brown, naturally. But in 1962, on Stax Records, there was a instrumental by Booker T and the MGs called Green Onions. And it just turned out to be one of those noodle jams where guys were just riffing in the studio, and Booker had been playing this, keyboard riff for a while. And Steve Cropper on the guitar liked it. The drummer came in and they played. I mean, Green Onions is probably just one of those songs that you may not know the name of it, but you know it when you hear it. I can't believe that song is over 60 years old. Wow. Musicians have been good for a very long time. They just have. But yeah, they said they wanted to call it Funky Onions at first, but then they were like, oh no, funk is a bad word. We can't say funk or funky, so let's just call it Green Onions. Anybody ever seen a green onion? Just asking. But yeah, by the time 1975 comes around, funk was acceptable. And that's what George is talking about. Funk used to be a bad word. Now everybody's getting down. But yeah, Let's Take It to the Stage is the title track is one of the earliest instances of a diss track that I can think of, aimed at another artist. Although there's also, real quick before we get into the rest of the album, there's Superstar, Remember How You Got Where You Are by the Temptations. That was Norman Whitfield firing shots at Eddie Kendricks after he left. Just as My Imagination was soaring through the stratosphere. So yeah, I mean, I won't say Let's Take It to the Stage is the first, but it's the one that really sort of makes me laugh when I think about it, because they name drop bands. I mean, they called Rufus Sloofus. Sly and the Family Stone, Slick and the Family Brick is just ridiculous. Fool in the Gang is obvious. Calling James Brown the Godmother. Calling Earth, Wind, and Fire, Earth, Hot Air, and No Fire. Just as Shining Star was really about to take off. You know how crazy that would have been if we had social media and stuff back then? Like, oh, wow. George Clinton and them just called out Earth, Wind, and Fire. That new song that got Shining Star is going to sink like a stone. I don't think that would have happened, honestly, because Shining Star was just one of those songs that just was destined to be a GOAT level song. But it's just funny when you think about it. Slick and the Family Brick. Earth, Hot Air, No Fire. Sloofus. God bless George, man. That boy was out of his mind in 1975. Also on this album, there is a legendary Funkadelic track that has a backstory. It's about 2.5 minutes long, and it has but one lyric. Shit, goddamn, get off your ass and jam. That's all that needs to be said. But, however, according to George's memoirs, there was a white dude that was really grungy that just came in off the street one day, apparently, while they were in United Sound in Detroit, and said, "Can I play something for you guys?" And George was like, "Okay, turn on that track." And then this dude just waylays into this ridiculous guitar solo, and he was never heard from again. That's the story. That's the story that George tells. I don't know if this dude is still alive or not. If he even remembers he played it. Because remember, this was 1975. And people were tripping off of different things. Cocaine wasn't as prevalent back then because cocaine was still one of those gourmet drugs, like super expensive, like only the really rich people did cocaine. But you could still get shrooms, you could still get weed, pills were still a thing. There were other inhalants that you could take. So this dude might have literally been stoned out of his mind, had a guitar in hand, and said, just saw a music studio and said, "Oh, music studio. Let me see what's going on inside, buddy." And that's it. But yeah, Get Off Your Ass and Jam. One of my favorite songs in the P-Funk catalog. It's just because of the legend behind it and the fact that you only need 2.5 minutes of just nodding your head, because And granted, I used to wish Get Off Your Ass and Jam was longer, but when you start snapping your neck for 2.5 minutes, it's like, all right, okay, that's enough. So yeah. My other favorite song on this album is called The Song Is Familiar. It's one of the more introspective songs. Like, I wouldn't even call it introspective. I just call it, it's really sort of like a spiritual in some respects. There's a song that I sing whenever I'm sad, feeling bad. There's a place in my head that I go when I'm feeling low. It's really a beautiful song. It's about a relationship going bad. There's a song you can sing when the love you had is finally going bad. There's a place you can go. It's a quiet place when all you need to do is space. Perfect. Like, we all have songs like that. So the song is called The Song Is Familiar. It's the next to last song on the album because Atmosphere, the 7-minute ender, is basically Bernie Worrell just flexing on the keyboards. That's it. And George has some off-color stuff about slang for different sexual organs in the beginning, but the rest of it is just Bernie going crazy on the mood, going crazy on the organ. And Bernie Worrell, I don't even think it's fair to call him the secret sauce. I think he was the main ingredient. And granted, this was a clique of musicians that had Bootsy Collins on bass, the late Eddie Hazel on guitars. I mean, these are name brand guys. And of course, George overseeing the chaos. And you had your usual P-Funk guys cycling in and out, like, Ray Davis, the late Ray Davis, the bass singer, Clarence Fuzzy Haskins, who passed away not too long ago. Who else? Shucks, Gary Scheider, Star Child. That's where my Twitter handle came from at first. So many guys that when you know music and you know the P-Funk mythology that were important. But I don't think any of them were more important than Bernie Worrell. Not by any stretch of imagination. This dude, he arranged the strings for Parliament and the horns for Parliament. He played the keyboards. He wrote songs. He was indispensable. He was totally indispensable. Like, when you just think about how he lived a life of reverence because he was just this genius keyboardist. And he managed to make Parliament Funkadelic that much better. I mean, they were already great, but Bernie made them greater. So just listening to him fool around on Atmosphere for 7 minutes is a trip. It's a fun trip for sure. But I think what people tend to forget about P-Funk is that it's not easy switching between styles as a musician. That ain't something that you just do and say, oh, I want to, play like this. I want to play like that. And it's like, you got to really adjust your thinking, adjust your attitude, adjust your instruments, because you got to play in different keys and all of that. So when you think about, these are the same guys that did Chocolate City. And let's take it to the stage. Likely in the same studio sessions, because the albums came out 13 days apart. So it's not like they said, okay, we got 13 days, let's do another album. Now, they probably started cycling different things out, like, okay, all right, one studio over here, we're going to do No Head, No Backstage Pass. Okay, in this studio over here, we're going to do Chocolate City. So we need a little more space for the horns and the strings and all of that. But over here, for No Head, No Backstage Pass, we just need a drummer and a guitar and a bass. That means it. So George Clinton is the master of chaotic genius because he oversaw all of this. He's my pick for the greatest band leader of all time. And I love Duke Ellington. I love Maurice White. I love quite a few other band leaders. But I don't think anybody oversaw the madness to the level of success that George did with Parliament and Funkadelic. I don't know how you do it. It boggles the mind in 2025. I mean, in granted, 2025, you could probably get away with it now because you have all of these different technological aids. Like, people can make songs from their laptops and different things. Nah, you had to record. You had to mix in tape. like great. I mean, people have MP4s now. Like everything is streaming now. Back then, you had to record on tape, and you had to do it on like 8 tracks. Not like the 8 tracks, but tracks. You know, stuff that records the music. It's incredible. It's extremely impressive. So 1975 was a great year for Parliament Funkadelic, and it would only get better. Like I said, we'll address that album when it's time to address it. But I just think that if you're looking for a tipping point for Parliament Funkadelic taking off into the stratosphere, I think 1975, that April of 1975 is where you start. You start with Chocolate City, you get into the groove of that, and then you start headbanging with Let's Take It to the Stage. And you can't go wrong with either one. I highly recommend you listen to those albums. Spotify links will be to those albums in the description below, by the way. So that concludes this ride on the Groove Line. Make sure you watch your step. Thank you all for coming aboard. Greatly appreciate your time as always. The next ride will, of course, be next week. Not sure what we're going to talk about, but you know we're going to talk about music anyway. Also, I did write something for the Groove Line blog about Alex Isley's new EP, When. Brilliant EP from a great singer and a great songwriter. Click that link in the description below as well, and go listen to When. I may do a review on When at some point, but a video review of When at some point. But just Alex Isley, brilliant. But yes, that's gonna do it for this ride on the Groove Line. Greatly appreciate y'all's time as always. Till the next time we ride together, y'all be good or be good at it.